I caught my husband kissing his coworker in our driveway, and when I confronted him, he said it was innocent. Now his family is blaming me for overreacting. I'm 33F, married to Tom, 35M, and we've been together for 10 years, married for 7. For as long as I've known him, he's always been a dedicated husband. At least, that's what I thought. Tom works in marketing, and he's often gone for long hours, meeting clients and traveling for work events. But last Friday, something happened that made me question everything. I was working from home when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked out the window and saw Tom getting out, followed by a woman I didn't recognize. They were laughing, and before I knew it, they were kissing, right there in front of our house. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My heart started pounding, and my hands shook as I watched them. At first, I thought I must be imagining things. But there they were, his hands on her waist, her arms around his neck, locked in a kiss right outside my window. I felt like I was in a nightmare. I threw open the front door and stormed out, not caring if I looked crazy. "Tom, what the hell are you doing?" I shouted, my voice trembling. They broke apart, both of them looking stunned, like they hadn't expected anyone to see them. Tom took a step back, looking completely flustered. "It's not what it looks like," he stammered, his face pale. I crossed my arms, feeling my anger boiling over. "Not what it looks like," I spat. "I just saw you kissing her, Tom. Right here in our driveway. Who is she?" The woman looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Tom hesitated before saying, "This is my coworker, Lindsay." He turned to her, gesturing for her to leave. "You should go," he said quietly. Lindsay didn't say a word, just nodded and quickly got into her car, speeding off like she couldn't get away fast enough. As soon as she was gone, I turned to Tom, my chest tight with anger and hurt. "Explain," I demanded. He ran a hand through his hair, looking like he was searching for the right words. "It was just a friendly kiss," he said finally, avoiding my eyes. "It didn't mean anything. We were just joking around." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A friendly kiss," I repeated, my voice shaking. "Since when do coworkers kiss each other on the lips, Tom? Do you think I'm an idiot?" He sighed, clearly frustrated. "You're overreacting," he said, his tone dismissive. "It's not a big deal. I told you it was innocent." Overreacting. I felt like I was about to explode. I just caught my husband kissing another woman in our driveway, and you think I'm overreacting? Tom rolled his eyes, which only made me angrier. "Look, I get that it looks bad," he said, crossing his arms. "But I'm telling you it didn't mean anything. Lindsay and I have been working on a big project together, and we've gotten close. But it's not what you're thinking." I shook my head, feeling tears pricking at my eyes. "If it's so innocent, then why were you sneaking around?" I asked. "Why couldn't you tell me about her before?" Tom sighed, looking frustrated. "Because I knew you'd react like this," he snapped. "You're always so suspicious, always thinking the worst." His words stung, and I felt my anger turn into something darker, hurt. "Suspicious," I repeated, my voice breaking. "You're blaming me for this. You think I'm the problem here." He looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm not saying you're the problem," he muttered, "but you always jump to conclusions. I knew you wouldn't understand." I took a step back, feeling like the ground was slipping out from under me. "So this is my fault now," I whispered, barely able to believe what I was hearing. Without another word, I turned and walked back into the house, slamming the door behind me. I needed a moment to breathe, to think, to process everything that had just happened. But Tom followed me inside, not willing to let it go. "Can we please talk about this like adults?" he asked, his tone annoyed. I turned to face him, feeling a surge of anger. "I thought we were talking," I said coldly. "But it seems like you're just trying to make excuses." He rolled his eyes again. I'm not making excuses, I'm explaining. But you're too upset to listen. His dismissive tone was like pouring gasoline on a fire. You're right, I'm upset, I shot back. I'm upset because I just caught my husband being unfaithful, and now he's trying to make me feel crazy for reacting to it. Tom shook his head, clearly exasperated. You know what? I can't deal with this right now, he muttered. I have a meeting in the morning, and I need to get some sleep. He turned and walked upstairs, leaving me standing there stunned. I couldn't believe he was walking away, acting like this was just another argument, something that would blow over. I felt a tear slip down my cheek as the reality of the situation sank in. I spent the night tossing and turning, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Was he seeing her behind my back? I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but I knew he'd just brush me off again. The next morning, I decided to go to his workplace and see for myself what was going on. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to know the truth. I arrived at his office around lunchtime, hoping to catch a glimpse of him and Lindsay together. As I waited outside, I felt a mix of anger and dread bubbling up inside me. After about 20 minutes, I saw them. Tom and Lindsay walked out of the building together, laughing and talking like they didn't have a care in the world. My heart sank as I watched them, their closeness undeniable. I took a deep breath and walked up to them, my hands shaking. Enjoying your lunch break? I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. Tom's face went pale when he saw me. What are you doing here? He demanded, looking around nervously. Lindsay took a step back, clearly uncomfortable. I needed to see for myself what was going on, I replied, and it looks like I got my answer. Tom took a step toward me, his expression angry. This is completely inappropriate, he said, his voice low. You're embarrassing me. I let out a bitter laugh. I'm embarrassing you, I repeated, feeling my anger boiling over. You're the one sneaking around with another woman, and I'm the one who's embarrassing you. Lindsay looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe I should go, she murmured, taking another step back. Tom shot her a look, and she quickly walked away, leaving the two of us standing there in the middle of the sidewalk, surrounded by people who were now watching the unfolding drama. Once she was gone, I turned to Tom, my anger bubbling over. Are you going to keep lying to me? I demanded. Or are you finally going to admit what's been going on? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. There's nothing to admit, he said defensively. Lindsay and I are just friends. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I crossed my arms, not buying it for a second. Friends don't kiss each other on the lips, Tom, I snapped. Do you think I'm stupid? He looked away, avoiding my gaze. I'm done with this conversation, he said flatly, walking away without another word. That night, Tom and I didn't speak to each other. He spent the evening in his office, ignoring me, while I sat in the living room, staring at the wall, trying to figure out what to do. I felt like my whole world had been turned upside down, and I didn't know how to put the pieces back together. The next day, I decided to confide in my friend Sarah, 34F. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of everything. When I told her what had happened, she was furious. You can't just let him get away with this, she said firmly. Sarah's support gave me the courage I needed to confront Tom again. That evening, I sat him down and told him we needed to talk, whether he liked it or not. I'm not going to pretend everything's fine, I said, my voice shaking. You've crossed a line, and I need answers. Tom looked exhausted, like he didn't want to deal with this conversation. We've been over this, he muttered. It was nothing. I told you it was just a joke. I shook my head, feeling my anger rise again. It's not nothing to me, I replied, and I'm not going to let you brush this under the rug. Tom sighed, clearly frustrated. Fine, what do you want to hear? He snapped. That I'm sorry. That I made a mistake. Will that make you happy? I stared at him, feeling a pang of sadness. "I don't want an apology," I said quietly. "I want honesty. I want to know why you thought it was okay to betray me like this." He looked away, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't think," he admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know. I got caught up in the moment. But it didn't mean anything. It really didn't." His words felt hollow, and I wasn't sure if I could believe him. Just as I thought we were starting to get somewhere, the doorbell rang. To my surprise, it was Tom's mother, Alice, 63F, standing on our doorstep. She looked concerned, glancing between us as she stepped inside. "Tom called me," she said, her voice stern. "He told me you two have been fighting. What's going on?" I couldn't believe he had called his mother, bringing her into our private issues. I took a deep breath and explained what had happened, expecting her to understand. But instead, she turned to me with a frown. "Oh, honey, you're overreacting," she said dismissively. "Men make mistakes. It's not worth ruining your marriage over." I stared at her in disbelief. "Overreacting?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "He was kissing another woman in our driveway. How is that not a big deal?" Alice waved her hand, looking exasperated. "It's just a kiss," she said. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. Men sometimes need a little excitement. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you." Her words felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe she was excusing his behavior, acting like I was the one in the wrong. I turned to Tom, hoping he'd defend me, but he just looked away, refusing to meet my gaze. I felt completely alone. Over the next few days, Tom's family started reaching out, all of them echoing the same sentiment. His sister called, telling me I needed to let it go and focus on the good in our marriage. His father sent me a message saying that marriage requires forgiveness and that I should be willing to move past this small mistake. I was shocked. It felt like everyone was turning against me, blaming me for reacting to his betrayal. I started questioning myself, wondering if maybe I was overreacting. But every time I thought about that kiss, I felt the anger rise up all over again. Finally, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag and went to stay with Sarah for a few days. I needed space, a break from Tom and his family's constant guilt-tripping. Sarah was a lifesaver, offering me a shoulder to cry on and helping me see things clearly. "You're not overreacting," she told me firmly. "They're trying to make you feel like the bad guy because they don't want to deal with the reality of what Tom did. But you have every right to feel hurt." Her words were exactly what I needed to hear, and they gave me the strength to keep fighting for myself. While I was staying with Sarah, Tom started calling and texting, begging me to come home. He apologized over and over, saying he didn't realize how much he had hurt me. Part of me wanted to believe him, to go back and try to work things out. But another part of me was furious that he hadn't taken me seriously until I left. I finally agreed to meet him at a coffee shop, hoping we could have an honest conversation. When we sat down together, he looked remorseful, but I wasn't sure if it was genuine or just a ploy to get me to come back. I took a deep breath as Tom began talking. "I know I hurt you," he said quietly. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since you left, and I realize I've taken you for granted. I shouldn't have put you in this position." I wanted to believe him, but something about his tone felt rehearsed. "You don't get it, Tom," I replied, shaking my head. "It's not just about what you did. It's about how you handled it afterward. You tried to make me feel crazy, and your family made me out to be the bad guy. I can't trust you, and I can't trust them." He looked down, guilt written across his face. "You're right," he admitted. "I was wrong to make excuses. I was just scared. I didn't want to face the fact that I was messing up my marriage." His words were sincere, but I couldn't ignore the damage that had been done. "I need to know that you're willing to take responsibility, not just for me, but for yourself," I said firmly. And I need to know that you'll stand up to your family when they try to manipulate me into forgiving you." Tom nodded, looking more serious than I had seen him in years. "I'll do whatever it takes." I wasn't ready to let him back in yet, but his response gave me a glimmer of hope. I agreed to give him a chance to prove himself, but I made it clear that I'd be staying with Sarah for the time being. He seemed disappointed but understanding. For the next few weeks, we met up regularly to talk, and I could see him trying to change. He stopped brushing off my concerns, and he even started going to therapy, something I never thought he'd do. But despite his efforts, the hurt lingered. I still didn't know if I could fully forgive him. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from his mother, Alice. "Tom told me you two are working things out. I'm glad to hear it, but I hope you're not dragging this out unnecessarily. The good wife knows when to forgive and move on." Her words made my blood boil. I felt like she was trying to control the narrative, to make sure I was being the good wife she thought I should be. I called Tom furious. "Why is your mother still interfering?" I demanded. "If you're serious about making this work, you need to keep her out of our marriage." Tom sounded exasperated. "I didn't ask her to do that," he insisted. "I've told her to stay out of it, but she just doesn't listen." I shook my head, feeling the anger bubble up again. "Then you need to make it clear that I won't tolerate her meddling. If we're going to rebuild this, we need to do it on our own terms, without your family's constant judgment." Tom promised to handle it, but I wasn't sure if he really understood the gravity of the situation. I needed to know that he'd be willing to stand up for us, no matter what. A few days later, he surprised me by inviting both of us to a family dinner. He said he wanted to set the record straight with everyone present. I was hesitant but agreed, hoping this would be the moment he'd show me he was truly committed to us. When we arrived, the tension was thick. Alice immediately made a comment about me being dramatic for staying away so long. But before I could respond, Tom stepped in. "Mom, stop," he said firmly. "What happened between us is our business, not yours. If you can't respect that, we won't be coming around anymore." The room went silent. Alice looked stunned, and his sister shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "You're really going to let her dictate how you act?" Alice asked, clearly offended. Tom stood his ground. "No, I'm setting boundaries," he replied. "This is my marriage, and if you can't support us, then I don't want you involved." I felt a rush of relief and pride, watching him stand up to this family for the first time. It felt like maybe, just maybe, we could get through this if he kept showing me that he was willing to prioritize our relationship over their opinions. After that, things started to improve. Tom made a genuine effort to show me he was committed to change. He attended therapy sessions weekly, both on his own and with me, and we started having honest conversations about our marriage, conversations we should have had years ago. I moved back in slowly, and though it wasn't easy, I felt like we were finally rebuilding. But the hurt was still there, like a shadow that I couldn't fully shake. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if Lindsay was still lurking somewhere, if she tried to reach out to him again. The fear was always lingering. One evening, as we were settling into bed, Tom turned to me and said something that caught me off guard. "I want you to know that I'll cut Lindsay out completely," he said. "I'll request a transfer to a different team if that'll help you feel more comfortable." His words took me by surprise, and for the first time, I saw a level of commitment I hadn't expected. "You do that?" I asked, my voice soft. He nodded. "I'd do anything to prove that I'm serious about fixing this." I felt a mix of relief and sadness, knowing how much we had lost, but grateful for his effort. Despite his offer, I told him I didn't want him to make drastic decisions on my account. "I need to know that you're willing to stay faithful, not because I made you change your life, but because you chose me," I said. He nodded, understanding, and promised to continue being transparent about his interactions at work. It was a difficult balance, learning to trust him again without feeling like I had to control his every move. But he seemed committed to doing whatever it took to rebuild my faith in him, and for the first time, I felt a sliver of hope. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself healing in ways I hadn't expected. Therapy had opened up new lines of communication between us, allowing us to address issues that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. I felt like I was finally seeing Tom for who he truly was, flaws and all. He was still a man who had hurt me deeply, but he was also showing me that he was capable of growth. I still wasn't sure if we'd make it in the long run, but I was willing to keep trying, to keep building something stronger from the ashes. Just as I was beginning to feel a sense of peace, Lindsay resurfaced. She texted Tom, saying she missed working with him and wanted to grab coffee and catch up. He showed me the message right away, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What do you want to do?" I asked, watching him carefully. He deleted the message without responding and looked at me. "I don't want anything to do with her," he said firmly. "I'm here with you, and that's where I want to be." His actions spoke louder than words, and for the first time, I truly believed him. But even with his reassurance, I knew there were things I had to come to terms with on my own. Rebuilding trust wasn't just about what he did or didn't do. It was about learning to believe in myself again. For so long, I had doubted my own worth, questioning if maybe I was the problem, if I had driven him away somehow. Therapy helped me see that his choices weren't a reflection of my value. They were his alone, and I had the power to decide what I wanted for my life moving forward. It was a painful but necessary realization. One night, after a long day, I sat down with Tom and told him everything I had been feeling. "I need you to understand something," I began. "This whole experience has changed me. I don't know if I'll ever be the same person I was before, but I'm willing to keep trying, as long as you're willing to do the same." He nodded, his face serious. "I know I've put you through hell, and I don't deserve your forgiveness," he replied. "But I want you to know that I'm here, for however long it takes, to make things right." His sincerity touched me, and I felt a spark of hope. As we continued talking that night, I realized that I wasn't ready to give up on us just yet. We talked about our future, our dreams, and even the plans we'd made before this mess had started. For the first time, it felt like we were on the same page, both fighting for something real. "I'm willing to move forward, but I need you to understand that trust takes time to rebuild," I said quietly. He nodded, taking my hand. "I'll wait as long as it takes," he promised. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we'd make it. In the following months, things started to improve, but I knew we still had a long way to go. Tom was patient, and I could tell he was trying to make amends in every way he could. His family, however, was a different story. They continued to send me messages, urging me to let go of the past and move on. Alice even sent a letter outlining all the reasons why marriage was about forgiveness, and why I should stop holding this against Tom. I was furious, but this time I chose not to respond. I didn't need to justify my feelings to anyone. One evening, Tom brought up the idea of going on a weekend trip together to reconnect. "We could use some time away, just the two of us," he suggested. I was hesitant at first, worried that being alone with him for that long might bring up too many painful memories, but eventually I agreed. We went to a quiet cabin by the lake, and for the first time, it felt like we were just us again. No family interference, no lingering shadows of betrayal. We spent the days hiking, talking, and rebuilding the pieces that had been broken. It was exactly what we needed to move forward. During one of our long walks, Tom turned to me, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he admitted, his voice soft. "But I want you to know that I'm committed to being a better man, not just for you, but for myself." His words struck a chord with me, and for the first time, I felt like he truly understood the gravity of what had happened. We sat by the lake, talking about everything we had gone through, and as the sun set, I realized that I was finally ready to let go of the past and start anew. Returning home felt different this time. We had left behind so much of the anger and resentment, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Tom continued to prove his commitment, not just in words but in actions. He was more attentive, more present, and more open with me than he had ever been before. And for the first time, I felt like we had a real chance at healing. We still had our challenges, and I knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but I was finally beginning to see a future together, one built on honesty and mutual respect. Looking back on everything, I realized that this experience had changed both of us in ways we hadn't expected. It had forced us to confront the flaws in our marriage, the issues we'd both ignored for too long. I'd learned to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, and to demand the respect I deserved. And Tom had learned to take responsibility, to be honest, and to fight for what mattered. We weren't perfect, and we probably never would be. But we were stronger now, both as individuals and as a couple.